Could you just introduce yourselves, just your names and the institutions that you're from?
I'm Louisa Evans. I'm Associate Professor in Environment and Development at the University of Exeter, and I'm a marine social scientist.
Okay, so I'm Mel Austen at the University of Plymouth, where I'm a Professor of Ocean and Society.
The project that you're lead supervisor for, Louisa, is Fisheries Governance in an Inclusive and Sustainable Blue Economy. And I wanted to ask first if you could just talk me through where the idea came from.
The project focuses on this idea of spatial squeeze of fisheries.
What is spatial squeeze?
Spatial squeeze is about, fishers out on the water intersecting with other industries. So marine tourism takes space, protected areas takes space, offshore renewable energy infrastructure takes space. And what that means is the areas that fishers can go is constricted. This PhD would be interested in understanding sort of everyday experiences of spatial squeeze and its social, cultural, and economic impacts.
Now, this is a very interdisciplinary PhD. You've talked about all the sectors that you're trying to reach. Can you tell me a bit more about the supervisory team and the different expertise that they bring?
Yeah, I mentioned that I was a marine social scientist. I do have a background in natural sciences, so I consider myself to be an interdisciplinary social scientist, and I dabble in sort of arts and creative methods, which is what we're trying to bring in here. And then we also have Mel Austen, who can introduce her expertise, and then I can introduce the other two supervisors.
My kind of role here is to bring in some of the ecological perspectives, but also I've been working in the marine policy space for quite a few years with the work I do as well. So I'm also very aware of these different conflicts that are going on, and we have to kind of work out how to help resolve some of those power issues by looking at how to get people to build trust together again, so that we can work out how to help people coexist better in that marine space.
Now, who else is on the team?
We are very lucky to have two non-academic stakeholders as co-supervisors on this project. So we have Aisling Lanning from the Marine Management Organisation, and we have Edward Ozenhines from DEFRA.
So Aisling is the evidence lead for the Marine Management Organisation, which does the regulation of a lot of fisheries and a lot of licensing and a lot of the activities that create the squeeze. So she's at the sharp end of trying to provide advice to people who need to resolve some of these issues. DEFRA is at the sharp end of trying to give advice to policymakers on many of these issues, to set policy that the Marine Management Organisation has to implement through its regulation. So it's a really nice team in that effect, that they'll sort of bring those different dimensions to the table.
The first year is quite often about getting on top of the literature, developing your own conceptual framework, really getting to grips with your methodological approach, and really leading up to being ready for fieldwork in year two.
What sort of skill set do you think would be really useful to bring to this project?
From my point of view, I'm keen to find someone who is really committed to marine sustainability, but who understands the need to also respect and take into account human well-being and the sort of livelihoods of these fishers.
The project is probably more suited to somebody with a social science background who's interested in the application of social science to environmental and marine problems. That's what's needed out there at the moment, more social science skills.
Okay, thank you. And then if potential applicants want to get in touch with you, who is best to get in touch with to ask further questions?
I'd appreciate if they could get in touch with myself in the first instance. Very happy to answer questions. I'd also, happily share the research proposal that we put together, so they can have a bit more detail on, the justification of the research and the approaches that we are suggesting.
I think there's a lot of career prospects. I've talked to a lot of people in government, and I know that government bodies are very, very keen to have more social sciences working in this space of marine science, of marine, all things marine. There's also obviously the research career prospect that comes out of this. There's just so much more research that can be done in this area.
I would add that the skills that they would learn both as a social scientist and in terms of the topic of conflict resolution and trust building, would put them in a good position for work in the NGO sector, for example, as well as consultancies, because they will be practiced in facilitation, in relationship building, and in those sorts of creative methods, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. Really good point.